I'm Dr. Mo Anderson, and today on Perpetual Motion, I'm joined by Sam Jump. She's a leadership coach and mindset mentor helping change makers break burnout cycles and lead with authenticity. After facing burnout herself, Sam now teaches others how to lead from within, build sustainable impact, and thrive without self-sacrifice. Listen, when chaos is everywhere you turn, you need these strategies in your personal toolbox. So sit back and lock in. Welcome to the show, Sam.
Hey, Dr. Mo, how's it going? Happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you. Looking forward to hearing about this because the world is in chaos right now. And I find that when those external things start getting to you, you put all these unnecessary pressures on yourself. So I'm looking forward to hearing more about how we can avoid burnout because I think preventive is better than reactive.
100%. Absolutely, all the time.
You've spoken candidly about your own experience with burnout, and I've spoken many times on the show about mine. I lecture about it. Can you share, though, for your experience, what led up to that moment and what signs you now realize were warnings that you missed?
Yeah, and it was many moments, right? Because burnout is a cycle. It's a subconscious habit, or at least it proved to be that for me. And it would show up from a place of like the whispers inside of like knowing that I wasn't really acknowledging when I was at an edge for myself or when I was at capacity and I kept going and I would keep saying yes and taking on other opportunities or other people's work. And then before I know it, I'm on the couch for a week and a half because my physical body has then manifested the resonance of being overworked, overproducing, overcommitting, not listening to myself when I hear all those whispers. And it took me years of having that cycle come back around and me getting increasingly frustrated with myself for continuing to not listen, or, the same kind of environment would show up in a different form.
Hmm.
I would again go into it with this excitement, but then fall right into the same habits. And, as Ram Dass says, you were constantly met with our guru in drag. And so what he means by that is that, the same cycles that we're here for, we are going to have the lessons and the opportunities continue to come up to us in different forms, hoping that we will catch on to those patterns in the different forms that they take so that we can start to choose ourselves. And so it took me years of continuing to not choose myself and almost reaching that rock bottom point of I can't keep doing this. Like health and well-being is such a priority in my life, and it always has been. So to recognize that is a value for me and continue to operate against it, it just became this point of internal friction and frustration that I was hurting myself by way of not honoring my boundaries, not listening to what my needs were, and continuing to feed this cycle of burnout that was making me physically ill.
Wow, wow. And do you think that's a learned behavior? And I ask that because I come from a family of just givers, martyrs. We're going to help no matter what. That's our duty. That's what we're supposed to do. So that was some of the issue for me was I didn't learn how to say no.
Absolutely. And if you did, that it was almost a point of shame or guilt,
Right.
that whenever it was like, oh, I don't have anything to give, that it
Hmm.
was this thing of like perceived lack or scarcity that you should be able to keep giving or to keep, realistically be taken from and be able to keep giving. And so, absolutely, it was something that not even just in my initial tribe, my family, that I saw men and women both in that same mentality of like give, 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 but especially the women, especially, my grandmother and mother were my primary caregivers, and watching them, be in this place of exhaustion and depression chronically
Yeah.
and still push and
Yeah.
still have the world expecting them to show up constantly and be on. And then the guilt and shame that they would put on themselves even whenever they couldn't keep going or whenever they would be having a literal breakdown. And then they're just mad at themselves that they've reached that point. And so it is absolutely a learned behavior even within my family system, but then, you see it repeated in work environments, in friend circles, in other organizations. It's not just strict to family and generational. It's absolutely a cultural expectation.
Absolutely. And the other symptom, and you might have said it in that list, is just the irritability, the emotions, even when they're doing stuff, there's no joy there anymore. You're supposed to be giving with joy, and it's like,
Right,
okay, fine, what do I do now?
right.
Come on, people, let's go.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, and I think that that is one of those things that I'm sure we could have a whole episode about in itself, but around the ways that our body is trying to communicate with us when we're at those edges or when we're meeting our own
Hmm.
internal boundaries. Like when people are like, "Oh, how do you know when you're reaching the edge of a boundary?" It's really quieting in and listening to those things. And that's definitely my one of my loudest sirens inside is when my patience is minimized, when my
Hmm.
irritability is more easily triggered, when I get to a place of frustration. And, and it always impacts the home first. It's always like the people closest to us that have to end up bearing the weight of meeting those boundaries. And those are the people that we least want to have impacted by those things. And so it really is doing the work and how, even if it is toward our leadership or toward our work cultures, it impacts every part of our lives when we're slowing down and taking notice of what we need to be focusing on by way of, compass that is guiding our lives.
Yeah, yeah, and it's so ironic that for some of us, a lot of the things we're doing are for the family that we're
Right?
then too
Yeah.
irritable to enjoy and love on the way we should because we're exhausted. Out there in the world is just crazy the way that all comes together. And also, and I'm just way off the questions I prepared, but
Ah, that's
but your
great.
answer was so beautiful. The other thing is that for me, I missed the warnings from my friends and family. They could see it way before I just, crumbled. And they were like, hey, you need to slow down. Why don't do you really need to be on another committee? Do you really need to, practice on Saturdays also? And
Right.
I just brushed them off. And I don't even know why, because they had no reason to say it, but out of love. I don't even know how to explain it, but we should listen to those
Right. Yeah.
people, right? Who know
Yeah.
us best.
Absolutely. And the people who know us best and that care the most about us with no other motive than to love us and care about us. And I think especially at least for me, knowing that especially when I'm in that mode and reaching that point of an edge for myself, my openness to hearing it from others
Mm,
almost feels like it's slowing me down from that going momentum that
mm,
I know I need to keep going. So it's like all of these wires can get so crossed as far as what we know we need, what those that love and care us about us are shining back onto us. Those are our main mirrors, right? And so we have all of these things that are trying to help save us from ourselves, and how easy it can be when we have so much momentum behind us and so much learned behavior of just continuing to crush it. And I know, at least for me, when I'm in that mode, I feel like my frequency can feel hard, like I feel like it's, less receptive. So I feel like the people who are letting me know might be less open to telling me more than once. And it's like a thing of like, okay, I've let them know one time and it wasn't received, and I'm not gonna, push that. And so it's, again, we can so easily disregard the messages that are coming to us from all over if we're not slowing down and practicing receptivity.
I'm so glad this conversation, this topic is very much now in, everybody's vocabulary and everybody's mind, because hopefully people like you talking about it are going to help others just avoid what we've gone through. Uh,
Absolutely.
that tracks. Changing the topic just a little bit, you've used the term embodied leadership. For those of us unfamiliar with that concept, how would you define it, and how does it differ from traditional leadership models?
Yeah. So the leadership models that I've tried to abide by so many times in my life end up usually being around like discipline, reward systems, the kind of leadership that helped inspire the culture that we're now trying to navigate away from, rebuild a stronger one, but where there is a lot of judgment, there is a lot of criticism, there isn't a lot of receptivity in those spaces. And it's almost like this hierarchy that everyone is trying to both navigate. And then you have parts of culture that are trying to avoid getting swept up in it, but then other people that are trying to commit their lives to climbing this imaginary ladder, and at the same time disregarding everything within them that is actually telling them what what is for them and what's not. And so with embodied leadership, we're really giving ourselves an opportunity to understand what's special about us and how we're here to really change what has been accepted as the status quo around leadership. So how can we go into leadership spaces and really acknowledge and respect and appreciate the voices of everyone involved? How can we go into these places and really embody our consciously chosen values so that we're treating each other with respect? We're empowering each other, that we're able to be truthful and trusting and know that the people who are leading this space are going to be operating from truth and trust. And so really embodying our leadership means showing up more consciously. It means showing up and really slowing down, regardless of the pace of what you're doing. I was in events for a long time, and the pace of those spaces can be furious, especially getting to
For
day of
sure.
show. And so being able to still slow down and make sure that people are feeling heard and seen and acknowledged and that their contributions matter. And I think that when people can feel that, then they're going to show up in whatever situation they're in a more wholehearted way. And that changes everything, right? That changes all the dynamics and all of the opportunities for success in any avenue when everyone that's there can feel like they're taking ownership of what they're putting energy toward.
That positive feedback you referenced, that just changes the whole culture, changes the atmosphere, because we can do everybody can sprint for a little while.
Right.
But, when you just push too hard and then you don't show folks appreciation, we've seen survey after survey that they just want you to say thank you, for goodness sakes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, for that grind. And since we're not thanking ourselves and appreciating ourselves, I guess we're overlooking that we need to do that for others. I love that you said climbing that imaginary ladder, because we're talking a lot about leaders here, but they tend to be prone to this, but it can happen to anyone. But I had this image of climbing an imaginary ladder to break an imaginary ceiling.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I think that there are, the upper limits that we reach, both within the work environments, but then within ourselves and the amount of extra energy that we're applying toward getting through those ceilings. And it's like, is that even the ceiling I want to be navigating?
That's where I
Is
was
that
going with
even
it. Right.
my ceiling?
It's this Someone else created that ceiling. It's not even my ceiling. It's not my table. We're
Yeah,
putting all
the
this
ladder's
effort,
broken. There's
all this effort into stuff other people created and told us to want
Yeah,
it.
right. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that that is another one of those examples of outdated leadership standards and expectations is going for other people's goals and not only either not acknowledging that they're not in alignment with yours or noticing that they're not in alignment with yours and still feeling this external force that you should want that. And so then you're noticeably, I mean, how many people for decades are so committed to this thing of the American dream that they're not following their heart. And then we have this, epidemic around heart disease and we have this epidemic around gut health and people aren't putting it together around the lack of self-worth because of leadership standards in our culture, the lack of following our heart or support to even know what that means that are woven into the ways that the leaders around us are feeding us these expectations. And so I feel like the more people can, like you said, get to this place of looking at things preventatively, I think that we have a lot better opportunity of, increasing even the longevity of our physical bodies because we're happier inside and we're making choices that are aligned with where we want to be and what makes us happy and what makes us joyful. And that doesn't blow out our light every day when we go into this, work environment.
Yeah, yeah. I envy these younger generations, ZXQ. I don't know what we're on now, but that they actually go out looking for jobs that align with their values, that they want to know their mission, what they're invested in.
Right.
It never occurred to me to ask you to look at that.
Examples,
Right,
we were the first ones that started dabbling with that because our
right.
mothers and grandmothers didn't have that support. They didn't have that information or invitation to challenge or be curious about what they were being told. My grandmother got married at 15 and started having kids and never drove. Like, she's not the only one that was like that. And that wasn't that long ago. So the fact that we're already seeing the ripple effects of us daring starting to live a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter. And hopefully, they're not facing these questions in their 30s and 40s and 50s.
Yes.
They're getting to tackle them earlier. And I think, we don't have to get too far into this even in, especially around pandemic and after. It was unfortunate to see a lot of headlines around like, oh, this younger generation is lazy, or this younger generation just doesn't work. And how
Wow.
disheartening to see that, knowing that,
Yeah.
being on the cusp of that generational shift where it started to be like, oh, I'm just not okay with it being that way. And I'm not going to go support and invest my time and energy into these toxic environments. And, you have the generation that's still leading mainstream media that is feeding these narratives that are harmful to the upcoming generations. And thankful that there are those of us who have eyes that are open to seeing the truth of it, and that they're just having, more stern boundaries, and they are practicing more embodied alignment in their choices in life.
They
I mean,
are.
even the fact that, drinking is going down, that alcoholism is minimizing.
Yes,
I think
thank
that's
goodness.
another statistic that shows that embodied values are becoming more woven into our culture.
Yeah, and a lot of that drinking was to deal with the stress of the things we talked about
Right. Yeah. The numbing.
previously.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Self-medication, absolutely. I love it, and I'll just we're not gonna go too far down that, but I also think that I really push having friendships and relationships of multiple generations, not just your boomer parents or your grandparents, but others. From that, I've learned, and I have a lot of young people who work with me, helping me do my 900 jobs, but they are so efficient. You know,
Right.
if what
Yeah.
I thought was lazy, they did in an hour with technology what I was over here taking 4 hours to do. They're
Right.
just
Absolutely.
very, very resourceful and efficient. And then they learn from me that there's some, there's some wisdom, there's some things to some traditions and some standards that really do help you have a better outcome. So we help each other and not, okay, boomer and lazy this and all of that, like you said, which is very much media and bot driven to keep us divided.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it doesn't help at all. It's actually proven now for decades that it hinders us, that we don't have a tribal culture like other cultures do. So where we don't have community, that everyone's raised to be in an island, and not everyone, but the majority are
Yeah.
raised to live with the theory of being on an island. You get married and then you're on an island, or you decide to not get married and you're on an island, and you might have a community of support, cool, but you don't have this, like you said, multi-generational reach or access or ability to build your life around reciprocity in learning from other people in other generations. And I think that, we get to experience daily the detriment that that's proven in our culture, to not have that sense of tribe, or as people age out, that they're pushed aside. And it's heartbreaking. And I
It
think
is
that,
heartbreaking.
again, the choices, like you're saying, to interact with people that are not in your most immediate generations, I think that that too is a part of a value system of inclusivity.
Absolutely, absolutely. And now we've got a loneliness epidemic. It just
Yeah.
we just keep going from bad to worse. So more on the high achievers. Many high achievers believe pushing through discomfort is necessary for success. What mindset shifts do you recommend to help them unlearn that belief?
I think it's small and steady wins the race. I think that, again, whenever we're trying, especially when we're so fed up or we're so tapped out, the idea of changing anything out of our comfort zone can feel overwhelming. And so I think that really just slowing down to acknowledge when you're starting to feel uncomfortable, that you get a little bit curious as to what about this is making me uncomfortable. And even more so, if you can slow down and be still enough to be like, where do I feel that discomfort showing up in my body? Like, what about this is making me aware that I am not comfortable in my current situation? And so I think that whenever we can get into our body and really start to take our power back, then we can start to feel more confident and supported in making changes, and even having a clearer path to accessing what we need that to be. Because so many people that I've talked to, okay, you don't like your situation, but what situation would you like? And they have no idea. And so I think that for us to slow down and get curious, I think those are two powerhouse moves initially whenever you're noticing that something or everything about your current environment or situation isn't for you, that you start to understand why so that you can start to be guided to what would be for you.
Nice, nice. I've spoken to several people about life design, which was a
Mm,
concept I didn't know about a few years ago, but you really do need that. We do it so much professionally, we start our businesses and we've got this business plan, but we don't have a personal mission plan or a guide for, because how can you work towards something you don't really know what you want other than scrolling on your stream with FOMO,
right.
what other people are doing.
Comparison, like you have so much comparison and you
Mhm.
have so much self-criticism that sneaks up and everyone has their highlight reels on. But again, like you were saying, people aren't talking about the realness behind and the growth opportunities and the struggles that people are overcoming and how to overcome them. Because we can talk all day about overcoming them, but if people don't have a personal why behind it, then it's just like anything else where you're attaching yourself to someone else's goals and visions, and that's not sustainable.
Really? Really? 'Cause I get a lot of it. People see solely the highlight reels, but they don't see that Tuesday I worked 18 hours,
Right,
and Wednesday I was so tired that I literally went to bed. I got off work at 6, I ate, and at 6:45 I was in the bed asleep. I was so
right,
exhausted, but I don't post that,
right.
so you don't know that part of my life, and that's what I do. Obviously, I can't make up for that amount of work, but I know I need rest. I have a chronic health condition. I'm going to drink my alkaline water and I'm going to bed. And that's part of what I do to keep me, because I would go, from my day job to, okay, I got to do this now. I got to do this now. And now it's like, no, I don't. I'm going, I'm going to bed.
Yeah,
I'm tired.
yeah, and to learn to start building the courage muscle of saying no to things when they're not a full-bodied yes for you. And so I think that whenever something is a full-bodied yes, you almost feel a physical pull toward it whenever it's brought up. But for the things that you feel like you're having to talk yourself into, that the accepting that it's okay to say no to those and that you're really honoring yourself and building your trust in yourself to make those choices for your well-being. And I think as we're making little steps like that in our personal life and in our work life, then we start to recognize how much more easy and clearly those kinds of decisions come out of us.
Yeah. Yeah. And part of that courage muscle is just saying no, because some of the guilt gets into when you're lying about why you don't want to do it when you
Right.
really do
You
just
don't
want
make
to lay down.
excuses.
I make up these whole big things, and I got to remember not to post as I'm lying in bed
That's
because I
so
said I was
funny.
at this thing.
Right.
If
You
you
should have
just
just
say
gone.
no, it gets rid of all of that. You just said no. You
Yeah. No,
don't have to
period.
give a reason.
Yeah.
Just
No.
no. I
Yeah. No
cannot.
is a complete sentence is
Yes,
one of the
in
most
every
powerful.
language, girl.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And I agree. And I think that, the amount of energy that people will put into fabricating the reasons, over explaining, like,
Yes.
the self harm in feeling a need to over explain to anyone. And, I think, I've encountered so many people who feel like their friends or their family aren't going to understand if they just say no. And I'm like, they will. They will learn that when you say it, you mean it, and you mean it with love and respect. But more importantly, you mean it with self love and respect. And then before you know it, they're starting to say no to things too, because they're seeing that you can do it and be healthy and still be supportive and still be in community, but you don't need to say yes to everything. And then all of a sudden, they see the empowerment that that is, and they start making those choices. And then all of a sudden, you have a whole community that's able to lift each other up and celebrate each other for having
Yes.
their boundaries and for trusting their internal guidance when they're at capacity or just don't want to. Like, I just don't feel like it today.
Absolutely, absolutely. This is a group I want to talk about. I know you do coaching very successful people, and I'm sure a broad span of people, but my listeners, a lot of them are alphas like me and just always trying to achieve something. But how do you help clients recognize when they're stuck in a burnout cycle, even if they appear successful on the outside? I mean, how do they recognize this is a problem when they're, constantly getting the accolades and medals
Right.
and promotions?
Yeah.
Yeah,
And, I feel like so many people that I have worked with, they have the accolades, they have the letters behind their names, and some
right,
of
right.
them are the least happy. Some of them are the least fulfilled. Some of them are the ones that, dread going into work because they're holding such big space for other people that they once thought that they wanted, but they're doing it on other people's terms. They're not doing it on their own terms. And for some people, that means getting to a point of understanding that they're in the wrong environment for themselves at this point. And at that point, it's a deep, some deeper work that we really have to go into about, well, then again, what do I want? Especially they've gone through, they've done the, they've got the metrics, they've got the accolades, they have the certifications, and now what? And so, there are the people at that extreme where the environment they're in really just isn't conducive for who they want to be anymore. And then you have the other people that, it is a point of realizing, like we were discussing earlier, if you're realizing that who you're showing up as isn't who you want to be, that's one of the biggest signs of reaching this place of burnout. Whenever you feel like you can't reach a place of joy, whenever you're completing a project and you don't feel celebratory, you feel drained by it. Or you're having these team meetings and they feel like they're not really accomplishing anything. You're just kind of spinning around in circles. And that's a reflection of the spinning around in circles we have going on inside. And so I think really just kind of taking an inventory of what you have going on and how it's making you feel, which again, in work environments is still taboo in most environments to discuss. So to have a safe space to be able to tap into those things so that you can understand, sure, you're going through and getting all the milestones, but what does that feel like for you? Does that feel like success and accomplishment? And if so, does it feel like your success and accomplishment? Or does it feel like you're just on a hamster wheel chasing other people's goals? And so I think it's just really about, it's such an individual work that we have to do because burnout shows up for different people in so many different ways. And for some, it's the constant rumination, right? For some people, it's just that the chatter won't stop, or that the self-criticism is always in the background of, oh, sure, you did this and it's really cool, but it's still not enough. And so slowing down to recognize where those patterns exist is the first step.
Right. I can remember when I was a young dentist working at this place. We call them big box dental places because they see so many people and have so many associates. And it was such a poor fit for me that I would pull up in the parking lot at 7 in the morning and cry. I would cry every day. I mean, I could feel it building up as I was driving there, and I would get in and I would do a good job and everything, but it was just sucking the life out of me. But I didn't have the maturity or the mentors at that time to know that even though it was a good place to learn, it was a good place to work, but it wasn't a good place for me. And I just didn't know how to figure that out until finally I got really sick and somebody helped me realize this is not the place for you. You can't change every environment. Some places you're just not a good fit. And that was one of the best lessons of my life. It was a hard lesson, but I was there a year and it almost killed me. It was so awful for me.
And when you got there at 7 a.m. and you had these, like, I mean, your nervous system was
Yeah.
like begging you to not go.
Yes.
And when you were in that environment, how were you able to show up as you expected yourself to be, or was that also impacting how you were showing up in the work environment?
I was showing up wonderfully. They
Yeah,
had no idea how
right.
much I hated being there.
Absolutely.
But the thing was, in healthcare, I'm working with patients and they need me to
Right.
appear to be at my best. And thank goodness patients don't know how we really feel.
Right. Yeah. Right.
But it is one of those professions where we are trained to not show our feelings. People who do emergency care, paramedics, physicians, people in healthcare. You don't want me nervous standing over you with a needle or seeming depressed. So we literally learn not to express how we feel, which is not healthy. That's not good for you either. And then and that's just with general worldly stuff. And then when you don't even want to be there, on top of that, you cannot let them know because, they're afraid. People are
Right.
already afraid and they're spending a lot of money. So you got to be on. So I became a brilliant actress,
Right.
except for that few moments in the car before I got out. And
Which
then
is hard, right? It's,
yeah.
because it is like almost also applauded when you can be feeling something like that and still go perform. I think that's one of the problems. I think that is part of, again, going back to the initial question around leadership norms and the leadership that we know we could have and be. And so I think that things like that are also reflective of that generational thing where we watched our mothers and our grandmothers cry it out in the bathroom because it wasn't really supposed to be seen in front of the rest of the family, and then go cook dinner and take care of all the kids and go to bed just to do the same thing over. I think that even that, like understanding how hard that is, especially in that profession where it is a part of it, there is no going around it. Thankfully, that's not the case in most work environments, but I can't imagine having to go in there and be the rock every day in such a place of volatility that you can't predict in any way. And, what that does to the nervous system of people that are in the healthcare system, it just, unfathomable that there's not more support for you guys
Right.
in holding that.
Right. And I want to clarify on that too, that it wasn't the patients, it was the management.
Yeah.
It was
Oh,
the
yeah.
way the
I
place
had
was
no
managed.
question.
Yeah, yeah. But just in case somebody else was listening, like, well, you don't need to be a dentist. No, it wasn't
Yeah.
that. It was the pressure that was being put
Right.
on me outside. So yeah.
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 Absolutely.
You work, you work, your work, you include a lot of science, is what I'm trying to say. You've alluded to it a little bit, but what role does the nervous system play in shaping the way we think, respond, and lead, especially under pressure?
I mean, the nervous system is at the root of everything. All of the electricity that is constantly running through our body is the nervous system. So whenever we have a thought, the thought that, fires a spark, that goes through our entire body. And whenever we're feeling an emotion, all the electricity that is operating our heart is caught up in that emotion, which then distributes to our entire body. So whatever we're thinking, whatever we're feeling is literally what we become. So it's the whole, and then, we go into the same thing of like what we consume then also has an impact on our thought, and it has an impact on our emotion. And that's how we become to anything that we're consuming. And so where that ends up being something that is empowering is when we start to learn that, oh, I can actually control the thoughts that are going on in my brain. Then we start to rewire the synapses that are going all through our body, changing the way that our nervous system operates. So something that might have been triggering from a place of frustration or from a place of anxiety or fear, sure, there are places where you actually need to feel that fear or you're in a harmful situation, but so many people are triggered by things that shouldn't actually be triggering fear within our physical bodies. And so when we can start to challenge or be curious and then decide to change the way that our minds receive something and react to it, when we start to consciously respond to things instead of subconsciously reacting, then we start to change the wiring in our bodies. That impacts circulation, that impacts, everything about how our body is operating cohesively. And even into our organs, the optimization of how our organs operate is all impacted by how clear and steady and calibrated our nervous system is. And that's impacted, like I said, with every thought, with every emotion. And if we're just constantly giving our energy away, thinking things that other people want us to be thinking, feeling things that we don't even understand are happening because we're so out of tune with our body and with our emotions, then our nervous system is just under attack regularly. So then when people are having, autoimmune issues, when people are having physical manifestations of those things, it's largely in part and traceable that a lot of people with autoimmune, regardless of the title it takes, are around the nervous system and around the system being attacked by thoughts, by emotions for so long that it just accumulates into this physical manifestation. And so again, going back to this place of being proactive and preventative, us choosing our thoughts and emotions more consciously is one of the most powerful things that we can do for our overall health and well-being.
Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Choosing ourselves, and that makes us better for everyone else.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
absolutely.
I love it all. I can use it all. I appreciate it all. And
Yeah.
listeners, I hope you can as well. I hate that we're out of time, but before we go, Sam Jump, tell listeners how they can find you online to learn more about your services and programs and coaching.
Yeah. So my website is powerhouseswithpurpose.com. I'm on LinkedIn. Powerhouses with Purpose has a page, but I'm also Samantha Jump, Jump. And then, I mean, that's good. I mean, anything else is on there.
Absolutely. And we always drop those in the show notes so that people can find you and connect with you. And listeners, I encourage you to do so. This was just an appetizer of all the great strategies, advice, tips, coaching she has to offer. Thank you again, Sam.
Yeah. Thanks, Dr. Mo.
And thank you, listeners. Please remember to like, subscribe, and share. And also change your words and change your world. Thank you.